Welcome back, Geography. How did economic and governmental relationships between Spanish and Native Americans in Mexico change over time? Mexico's history. Native peoples first grew corn in Mexico about 7,000 years ago. They also grew other staples, or foods eaten regularly, such as squash, chilies, and avocados. They were able to produce more food than they needed to survive. This surplus, or extra food, allowed them to specialize in other jobs. The Maya formed a civilization about 3,000 years ago. They lived mainly in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula and what is now Guatemala and Belize. One feature of their culture was great cities. They built pyramids and invented a complex writing system. Their civilization reached its peak from AD 300 to 900. Then it mysteriously collapsed. The Aztecs settled in central Mexico in about 1300. Their capital was Tenochtitlan, where Mexico City now stands. The Aztec had a complex social and religious system. They conquered many of their neighbors and made slaves of captured soldiers. They were also skilled farmers. Around 1520, Hernán Cortés led a small force of Spanish conquistadors, or conquerors, to Mexico. Within 2 years, they had taken control of the Aztec Empire. They were able to do this because their guns and armor were superior to Aztec spears. The Spanish also carried diseases for which the Native Americans had no resistance. These diseases killed many thousands. Many native peoples who resented Aztec rule joined Cortés as allies. The conquest completely changed life in Mexico. It brought Spain riches in gold and silver mines. Priests converted native peoples to the Catholic faith. Native peoples were forced to work on farms or in mines. Spanish rule was an example of colonialism. Under colonialism, one nation controls an area and its government, economy, and society. The colony's resources go to make the ruling nation rich. Settlers from Spain controlled most of Mexico's wealth. In 1821, Mexico gained its independence after 300 years of Spanish rule. However, little changed for the people who lived there. The country was ruled by wealthy landowners and native peoples remained poor. In the early 1900s, a revolution broke out. A revolution is a sweeping change. In Mexico, there was a new constitution and land reform. Land was divided into parcels given to poor people to farm. A history of Central America. The nations of Central America developed in similar ways to Mexico. However, there were also differences. The Maya thrived in Guatemala and Belize, as well as southern Mexico. Even after they abandoned their cities, they continued to live in the region. After conquering Mexico, the Spanish moved south. By the 1560s, Spain controlled most of Central America. In the early 1800s, Britain claimed the area that is now Belize. Central America became independent soon after Mexico. In 1823, Central American territories united to form one government. By 1840, they had separated into 5 independent countries. Belize was still a British colony, and Panama was part of Colombia. The countries of Central America were subjected to economic colonialism. Large companies from other countries dominated the people economically. They set up plantations, or large farms, to grow cash crops. These are crops grown for export. The people who worked on these plantations were poorly paid. The most important cash crops were bananas, coffee, and sugarcane. During most of this time, military strongmen called caudillos controlled the governments. The caudillos helped ensure the foreigners' success. The foreigners made sure the caudillos stayed in power. Around 1900, the United States helped Panama gain independence from Colombia. The United States wanted to build a canal there. The United States controlled the canal until 2000. Then, by agreement, Panama took control of the canal. The late 1900s were a time of conflict. The upper classes became richer. Most people, however, remained poor. Various groups demanded reforms. Several countries suffered from civil wars. Only Costa Rica and Belize remained peaceful. Costa Rica's President Oscar Arias Sanchez helped bring peace to the region. History of the Caribbean Islands. The history of the Caribbean islands is similar to that of Mexico and Central America. They have greater diversity because several European countries ruled them as colonies. Spain had colonies in what are now Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. The French settled what is now Haiti and some smaller islands. The British and Dutch also had colonies. In the 1600s, the Caribbean colonies became the center of the sugar industry. Many Native Americans workers died from disease, overwork, and starvation. Europeans brought in hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans to work the plantations. This was part of the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange was the movement of plants, animals, and people between Europe, Asia, and Africa on one side and the Americas on the other. This transfer also introduced several new diseases around the world. In 1804, Haiti gained its independence. The Dominican Republic won independence in 1844. Cuba and Puerto Rico were Spanish until the Spanish-American War in 1898. Cuba became independent, and Puerto Rico passed to the United States. Other islands did not become independent until the middle 1900s. Rule by Cordelos and poverty have remained a problem in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Fidel Castro took over Cuba in 1959. His communist government controlled all areas of the economy and society. Other islands have had difficulties. With few resources, they have been unable to develop strong economies. Many rely on aid from the countries that used to run them as colonies.